Hi, in today's video I wanted to talk about not getting paid as a freelancer, specifically from my experience as a audio engineer, both working within the live events industry and within the recording industry. Tomorrow I'm going to work at a local to me music venue called Metronome in Nottingham in the UK. It's owned by a company called Confetti Media Group. I've done quite a lot of work for them in recent years. Great company to work for, always good work, well paid, more importantly, paid on time and paid. You know, you couldn't really ask for more really from a client. Unfortunately, that's not always the way it goes. Prior to going to work that job tomorrow, I've got to pop by my storage unit just to prep some equipment that I'm going to take on a job with me next week in Newark, and this is working for a new client, so somebody I've never worked with before. And that kind of got me thinking just about not getting paid when people don't pay you, knowing what's a good client or potentially what would be a good client or a bad client. And that can be really hard to figure out. A lot of the time, you know, you're going based on reputation, or a lot of work I pick up is sort of through circles that I'm in within the industry, so people that I either directly know or people based on recommendation from other people. This client, I was recommended for the job by someone I know who they know, so there is that kind of mutual association there, which certainly helps when trying to decipher whether a client is going to be somebody you want to work for. One of the things, I guess, within my line of work is that a lot of the work I do is one-off jobs, single days of work where you're working for, typically for me, a 5-day working week. Every one of those days I could be working at a different music venue or for a different client each day. Some industries with freelance work, you're going to have longer term work where it's more likely that you would draw up a contract prior to taking on that work. And having a contract in place means that you've got something there legally, hopefully signed in writing, that lays out payment terms, dates and everything. So you've got something there to fall back on if things do go wrong and maybe you need to take some form of legal action. For single days of work, it's not really the dumb thing within my line of work. Certainly most people that I've talked to, and I know for myself, I can't imagine with the amount of different clients that I work for having to draw up individual contracts every time. It would just be entirely impractical. Most clients, I think, would find it a bit unnecessary. So a lot of the time you're having to take things just on good faith really, and using your intuition. You know, your knowledge of years in the industry certainly helps. The longer you've been working as a freelancer, you get better at working out whether somebody is going to be a good or bad client. This particular client for this job in Newark, I've spoken to them over the phone. They seem lovely. They run a reputable business. They have some issues with their PA system in their venue that I'm going to go take a look at, fault find and hopefully fix their issues for them. I have the utmost faith there that it's going to be a good client to work for and I'll get paid and there won't be issues. My experience working as a freelancer, at least full time, is it's something that's relatively new to me. In the sort of 12 years or so I've been working within the music industry, for around 8 of those years I worked for a company called DHP Family. They are a national UK music promoter and also owner and operator of several music venues within Nottingham, and they've got some venues in London and one in Bristol. And so I was working for an employer for all of those years. I did do bits of freelance work with them at time, but majoritively I was on a payroll being paid by PAYE. Some of those years I was on an hourly wage, the rest of the time I was on a salary. So an entirely different experience. You don't have to worry about sending off invoices, chasing invoices and clients and so on. When COVID hit, I was made redundant, which I won't go into in this video. All I'll say is that, you know, anyone who's been through a redundancy, my heart goes out to you. You know, it's a tough thing to go through. It was a difficult time for me, certainly, particularly in recent times. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. A lot of people have faced redundancies or job losses, but you pick yourself back up again, dust yourself off, and you know, you try and move forward and rebuild, which is what I did. I partnered with a friend and colleague, fellow sound engineer of mine. We started a recording studio which we ran for just shy of 2 years. That was set up as a limited company. So it was a company rather than us working as freelance sole traders, but there's not really much difference there in terms of you're still operating as freelancers, working for yourself, sending off invoices to clients, and at the mercy of people who may decide that they're not going to pay you or just not pay you on time. So I guess the question is, what do you do when you're faced with a client who hasn't paid on time or is maybe refusing to pay? Coming out of the studio business, I knew that I wanted to start another studio game by myself, but obviously that was going to take some time, finding a new premises for another studio and so on. So in the interim, I knew I had to step full-time back into freelancing as a sole trader, as a live sound engineer. I knew that was work that I could quickly and easily step back into. Sadly, the time that the recording studio ended, it was the end of October last year, which really was the worst time to be stepping back into the freelance live sound field. December was a good month. With it being Christmas, there can be quite a lot going on depending where you are within live music and live events. So December was a pretty good month, but I knew that January and February, and often March as well, they can be real quiet months. So typically within live events, your summer's going to be busy if you're doing touring work. A lot of bands are doing the festival circuit and so on. The start of the year, and then kind of after the summer, so maybe sort of autumn kind of time, they can be quieter periods of the year where typically, you know, if you're working as a freelance audio tech, you're going to account for those periods of year, and you're going to save during the busier periods of year to account for when you've got less work on, to make sure that you can get by and pay your rent or pay your mortgage and feed yourself and so on. At the time that I was going freelance, obviously I didn't have enough time really to save up enough money for those quieter months, and I didn't have much in savings already. You know, I would say I was fairly desperate for work, and November time I took a job. It was through a Facebook freelance sound engineers group. It was for an outdoor event. It was taking place in like a big tent marquee sort of thing, one that would typically hold maybe 1,000, 2,000 people. But this was there was kind of a dance floor, but then there was also lots of tables and seating, because part of the event was that there was a free course meal. So you pay for your ticket, part of that you were getting a free course meal, and then you were getting a course of live entertainment over the course of the evening. There were some quite big acts booked. It was an odd event in that it was in a small village, kind of out the way, not exactly in the middle of nowhere, but not necessarily somewhere I'd expect to have such a high caliber of event taking place, I guess. I didn't know much going in. There were a couple of Facebook messages, and then I got this person's number. We spoke over the phone. They certainly sounded reputable, and just looking at, you know, mutual friends on Facebook, the fact that they were part of this Facebook group, it certainly seemed like, you know, we were within similar circles working with reputable people. Just purely on that basis, I assumed that they had a good reputation, and they may well do. This incident that I've experienced may well be an isolated incident. Otherwise, they may well have a good track record. I don't really know. So typically I would invoice, obviously, for any work I'm doing. In the case of non-payment, obviously when you send an invoice, you're going to have your payment terms. The typical payment term would be net 30, so the client will pay you within 30 days. Some of my jobs, you know, I get paid immediately after or within a few days after, and so some of my invoices I'll send off due on receipt. Some will be 30 days payment terms. In the case of this job, this person said to me that they could pay me cash in hand pretty much straight away after the event. Next day I went down to, they needed some extra help, so I actually ended up doing a day and a half's work for them. Good day rate and half day rate. Yeah, I figured, you know, I'd get the payment, we could sort invoice out after if we needed to. I won't say that this was off the books, because it wasn't. And you have to be careful there if you ever decide to do any work off the books. Sure, it can be great getting some money that you can sneak past the tax man, but it also means that certainly in lieu of any written contracts, an invoice is going to serve as some proof and some evidence that you have carried out work and that a client needs to pay you. Also, an invoice is going to have all the relevant details on it, so you're going to have an address, a contact number, an email and so on for that client, which in the case of if you have to take legal action, you're going to need a lot of that information. So after this event happened, and it was a great event, I'll say that. I had a lot of fun working the event. It was the first of these events. The events company itself was a new company, I believe. I think they did well considering all of that. It was a very ambitious event, but it sold out. All the entertainment was really good. There were some quite high-profile acts playing, so a lot of money and investment going into it. What I didn't know at the time was that I wasn't being hired directly by this events promotions company. They were hiring the individual that hired me, and that individual was sorting out some of the extra tech staffing, I think sorting out a lot of the hire, but a lot of the hire itself, the PA system and lighting and staging and so on, were all coming from quite high-profile, reputable events hire companies within the UK. So that certainly offered a certain level of reassurance that this was all above board and legitimate. Anyway, so I worked the event. The next day, or the day after that, I think it was, I then spoke to them over text or phone call, and they said to me, still sorting out some of the cash for money from the event, which didn't quite make sense to me because this individual, as far as I understood, was separate to the events company itself, and I figured surely the events company would be sort of, it would be their concern sorting out all the money from the event and what profit and losses there were and so on. But I figured, okay, maybe the money, the payment for me and certain other individuals being hired is being passed down from the event company to the person that hired me, and then they'll pay me. I said, okay, no massive rush, just when you've got all that sorted, let me know. I think, about a week passed, enough time where I was like, okay, I'll follow this up. I think I sent a text at first, didn't get a response, so then try ringing the next day. Eventually speak to them on the phone. They say to me, oh, sorry, I've just been really busy, really flat out at the moment, gone straight from sorting everything with this event to doing other work, and I haven't been in the office and so on, and all stuff that, okay, not really my problem, but sure at the same time could be legitimate reasoning. So you give the benefit of the doubt and you say to yourself, okay, I'll give them a bit more time. I chase again and I chase again, and over time the sort of excuses or reasoning for still not making payment become more elaborate. It becomes clear that they're maybe having some financial issues, personal issues, which I won't go into in this video. I don't want to divulge that kind of information, both out of respect to them, but also if you're going through a situation like this and you reach the point where you then have to take some sort of legal action, if you've been seen to be publicly bad-mouthing somebody, I guess, or doing anything that could appear in that manner, then it's not going to stand to help you in your case. You always want to be mindful of whether or not you're going to have to take legal action, and from that mindset, just trying to follow things by the letter and by the book. Just maintaining a professional stance on things and not getting overly emotional or petty or anything like that. So I keep trying to give this client the benefit of the doubt and just be understanding. I think if somebody's having genuine issues, financial or personal or whatever, as long as they're not trying to make you feel bad or responsible for that, and they're willing to make good and to try and repair things and pay you, basically, that's okay. I think it's just about being honest, which in this case, I ended up saying to this individual, I said, look, if you're having real issues, financially particularly, just be honest with me and say, and we can work something out here. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I just want to be paid for the work that I did. It's nothing personal, it's just business. And they're apologetic, and they sort of seem appreciative of my willingness to be respectful and be patient. And they say, I appreciate you being patient, but still they're not paying me. Eventually I just outright say, if you can't pay me in full, I'll give you to the end of the month, and I need to be paid by then. Nothing came of that. So eventually I just laid out, I said, look, clearly, you're not able to pay me in full. I'm willing to work out part payment terms. If we're going to do that, if you agree, let's put together an agreement in writing. So just so we're both on the same page, this is all legally and professionally sound. And they said, sure, send me over this written agreement and I'll take a look at it. Bearing in mind that I was using up, a significant amount of my spare time. I took out, I think I spent kind of a few hours one day writing up this agreement. And when you add up all the phone calls, the messages and so on of me having to chase them, this is, over a period of going on 6 months or longer, which is a long time to be chasing somebody. You start thinking by that point, well, if I'm spending this much of my time, this is time that I could either be spending making money or just enjoying my life and not going through this stress and grief. But when you equate that to, maybe what would be an hourly wage, and you add up all the hours, all this time you've spent chasing a client, it quickly starts to seem not worth it financially. I think that is an important thing to bear in mind sometimes. Sometimes, sadly, you just have to cut your losses and maybe walk away from things sometimes. If something is causing you too much grief, too much stress, at the end of the day, it is just money. Although it was certainly not an amount to be laughed at, and it's money I could do with, definitely. That much time has passed at the same time that I'm bringing money in. How worth it is it trying endlessly to chase this money? Ultimately, if somebody is not going to pay you, they're not going to pay you, and all you're doing is just kind of causing yourself unnecessary grief. Yeah, this agreement, I sent it off to the individual. I still to date have not heard back from them on it, and it's gone past the point in the written agreement that the first specified part payment date, that has now gone past. So if they were to actually agree to this written agreement, I would have to rewrite it now and put in new payment dates. At the moment, I have just decided to take a break from all of that. Since the studio ending, I've been trying to find a new premises to start a new studio of my own. That's been a lot of stress, just staying on top of work and, my personal life itself. Like, it's all been a lot. And sometimes, if you have too many things going on and too many things that are causing you grief and stress, sometimes something has to give and you have to put something on the back burner for a while just for the sake of your own sanity. So that's what I've done. I'm going to give myself a bit of a break, focus on the stuff that is actually more important and more pressing to me right now, which is getting a new recording studio premises sorted and getting that started and off the ground. And then just other stuff that, I want to focus on in my personal life. I've recently become an uncle, so I'm excited about that. I just, I want to focus on other things. So at the end of this month, if I've still not heard back from them, I'll get back to them, just shoot them a message, no phone call, just keep it brief, to the point. Also, it's in writing. That is one thing I'd suggest. Avoid too many phone calls. Get things, whether it's over email or text messages or just in any form of writing, because then you have a paper trail or a digital trail, if you like, that if you do need to take things to court or small claims, you're going to have a record of evidence there, if you will. So I'm just going to say to them, I'll give you another week to sort out signing this agreement, which, side note, if ever you have to put some sort of written agreement in place, you don't have to get it signed, and actually sometimes that can be a bit of a deterrent to people. As long as there is evidence that they've agreed to it, whether it's signed or not, certainly having it signed does help. It adds to the strength of things in court, but it's not 100% necessary. In this case, I decided that I did want to get something signed just because I wanted everything to be as legally sound, if I needed it to be, as it could be, knowing that that might, then mean that this individual got deterred a bit. But I'll give them another week to sort out this written agreement. If they don't do it, I'm just going to say to them, I'm going to go through small claims court. And so that is the next step in the case of a non-paying client, to then take legal action. In most cases, obviously I'm talking in terms of the UK here, but I'm sure similar laws and principles will apply elsewhere in the world. But for most smaller jobs, going to the full proper courts, going through the courts, would just not be cost effective at all. But that's why the small claims courts exist, for a quicker and more simplified process of trying to recover money for a small amount. I think it's under £1,000 in the UK for small claims, so I will go through that process if I need to. Ultimately, I think when things go this far, you have to decide for yourself. Sometimes it is better just to walk away and cut your losses. I really don't want all this grief. I certainly don't want to have to go through the courts, small claims or otherwise. Even if I was in a great place in life and didn't have any other stresses surrounding me, I still just wouldn't want that grief. I'd rather avoid it. I just don't want the headache. But at the same time, there's the moral part of me that just morally, from that standpoint, does kind of want to fight things to the bitter end, just to make the point, and just so that people who do think they can get away with not paying somebody, they're given their comeuppance, if you like. I think in the case of this individual, I don't think they're some sort of con artist or whatever. I think it's somebody who just maybe is going through tough times, but who hasn't dealt with it in the best way. I say that because I feel like they've tried to make me feel responsible for their own hardship, which is not okay. I'm always willing to be patient and understanding and try and look out for other people's well-being, but ultimately this is work that I did, that I should be paid for, and I'm not going to be made to feel bad for just trying to get what is rightfully mine. In the case of another job I did towards the end of last year in December, which was a remote recording job, the client actually specified net 10 for payment, which at the time I thought, great, the sooner I can get money and get payment for jobs, brilliant. I do always prefer if I do jobs that are due on receipt, and certainly in terms of cash flow, I have the kind of regular gigs at the small local music venues where I know I get paid quickly, whether it's on the night or the day after or whatever, and that kind of helps keep a steady cash flow whilst I do some of the bigger jobs where I'm waiting for net 30 or whatever it is for the payment terms. Yeah, in the case of this remote recording job, net 10 seemed great. So this client is somebody that I know through a lot of other people that I know personally as friends and also as work colleagues within the industry. I know they're somebody who's a well respected individual, and they're a really nice, really lovely person. They were a pleasure to work with, super professional, and really looked after me on the job as well. It was a long, stressful, hectic day, and they seemed to recognise how hard I was working and seemed very appreciative of that, and actually forced me to take a break to get some lunch when I was quite happy to just soldier on and carry on through. They seemed to genuinely care about other people's well-being. After 10 days after this job, I hadn't seen payment come through. I think at the time it was, hitting a weekend, so I thought, okay, I'll wait till it's been 2 weeks. I'll wait 14 days. After 14 days, I then just sent them, a follow-up message, and I just said, hey, haven't received payment yet. Just let me know when you can get it over to me. Then didn't hear back from them for I think a few days. They got back to me with a nice message just saying, oh, really sorry, had some stuff going on or whatever. Money has not come through when I thought it would, which, although on the one hand, I do think that if you're going to hire somebody for a job, you should already have the money to pay them. But I know in the cases of a lot of jobs, particularly if it's something that maybe is being funded by somebody else, I've certainly done jobs where I've been sub-hiring equipment, maybe, where I'm then having to pay other individuals for the job that I'm being paid for, but I don't necessarily have that money outright to pay them, and I'm relying on the client who's hiring me for the job to pay me on time, and so it all falls apart as soon as that doesn't happen. This was a similar situation here, so I recognised that and I said, okay, no worries, no massive rush, just get it over to me when you can. Eventually they said, oh, I'm going to send you over a part payment now, which was not what we'd agreed, but at the same time I thought, okay, they're trying to make an effort here and they're trying to make good on paying me, so I appreciate that. Obviously I'd rather have all the money paid up front in one go, but yeah, part payment, fine, at least the money's coming through. And since then they haven't still paid me in full, but they sent several part payments and they are paying it off. And I think that was a case where they just had some genuine difficulties. They tried to make good on that, and they've done that in the best possible way. They've been honest with me and they've been communicative, tried to be professional about it, not try to sort of make me feel bad or responsible for what they've had going on. They've outright said to me, you know, look, I know none of this is your fault. I'm just trying to sort of explain the situation, but it's not your problem at all. We'll get this sorted, kind of thing. Whereas with the other individual, they've been quite the opposite of that. I think similar situation, but this is the thing, a lot of it is in just how you handle it. You know, things can quickly devolve into something quite messy where you end up burning bridges with the other individual. I don't think I'd work for them again. You know, all trust has been broken with them. I know that I could quite easily, I'm not going to go and do this, but I certainly could make other people aware that this individual has not paid me and probably isn't going to pay me. Which I think in some cases that's, you know, you should always do that in a professional way, but certainly in terms of, you know, if you're looking out for other people in your field and you want to warn people who might end up working with that client, look, you know, this is somebody that may well not pay you. That's totally fine, but for me, if anything, I just don't want any more drama or grief, so I don't want to do something that might kick up more of a fuss from them maybe, and also anything that if I do have to take this through small claims courts, that might affect that. So I'm just being careful about what I do. That can be a frustrating thing sometimes, where you know, where you feel silenced by a situation where you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, sort of thing. Anyway, that's about it for this video. I just thought I'd share some of my experiences. Like I said at the beginning of the video, going to work for a new client next week, and then having work on the remainder of this week where I'm working with clients I have established relationships with, who have always paid me on time and been good, steady clients. It just got me thinking about the bad experiences I've had, and I kind of wanted to share that in hope that it might be of use to anybody, might be of help. Anybody going through a similar situation, or anyone who has gone through a similar situation. Obviously, an experience shared, it can be a helpful thing, just in that, you know, being able to relate to somebody else and feel somebody else's pain, I guess. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear some of your stories. If you've had any nightmares as a freelancer, whatever field you work in, if you've had bad experiences that you've gone through, conversely, good experiences, great clients that you've worked for, just, yeah, share your stories in the comments below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again in the next one.